Welcome to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. I'm Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
This show features questions from the Personality Hacker community that we answer in about 10 minutes. We've been using personality types in our coaching for years, and we'd love to answer your questions about personal growth through the lens of type. You can find out more about us at personalityhacker.com. Okay, now let's hear today's question.
Hi, I've been tuning into the podcast for some time now, and it's been super helpful, and it brings me some questions about things I can do for myself, more specifically about the internal struggle between the need or want for a positive impact on others and making impulsive decisions that affect my ability to do that as an ENFJ with ADHD. So what things specifically do you guys think, other than getting time away from others and having time to just improve introverted intuition on your own or my own, do you think could help, as you call it, monkey mind? Because as an ENFJ, and that monkey mind already being a general tendency, and having ADHD increase my impulsivity or going with wherever my feelings or mind take me based on my external environment, it can make it very difficult in the moment to be able to even have the ability to allow myself to stop and think before acting in scenarios. This can very often cause me to put myself in situations where I continue to interact with people I shouldn't because I love genuine interaction and making people happy, or ones where I'm not able to figure out in real time whether or not speaking my feelings on a topic or conversation would be beneficial to me in another, or whether it'd be best to just sit it out, think it completely through, or let it go unless the same thing comes up in a later situation, which it then should be addressed. Thanks for all y'all's input and help.
Thank you, Salvador, for the question. As an ENFJ, you are struggling with ADHD, self-reported, you told us on your question. And man, that's going to make it harder because I think ENFJs in general going through the world, you're already an extrovert as an ENFJ, so you're already attuned to the outer world. You're using a driver mental process of harmony. It's technically called extroverted feeling, meaning you're an extrovert, you're using extroverted feelings, so you're tapping the feelings of people around you. And our world is increasingly putting pressure on all of us to be infinitely responsive to all the stimuli coming at us all the time. And I think it's only getting worse. Our society is, we're on our phones. We've got tons of marketing and messages and emails and phone calls, and our boss wants this and our partner wants this and our kids want, it never stops. And I can't imagine how tough it is if you're an ENFJ listening right now, and you, Salvador, I can't imagine how hard that is to shut all that off when you genuinely want to help people. You want to get needs met. You are attuned to the people around you, whether they're strangers or friends. You really want to help and contribute. And so I think the struggle is real. And I think that the ADHD probably doesn't make it any easier for you.
Yeah, I can't imagine being in a world that's so over-communicated. And I have extroverted feeling of harmony in my stack too. I've got it as my tertiary 10-year-old function. And that already makes me feel like I'm pulled in too many directions. The idea of having it as a dominant function or a driver, you've had more opportunity to get better at it than I have, but it still feels like a lot. So I also sympathize. There were a lot of things that you asked in your question, a lot of different circumstances or situations that if I was going to address all of those individually, I'd probably need a little bit more clarification. But I think what I read from the question or the core principle was, I'm an ENFJ, I've been diagnosed with ADHD, I really want to be a force for good in the world, and I find that the thing that we call monkey mind, this idea of like really being easily distracted and having a hard time focusing and concentrating and, sort of being overstimulated all the time, that seems to be robbing me of my ability to have the impact I want. So how do I address that?
Also, by the way, I just want a quick note that Salvador is talking about monkey mind. And just in case you don't know what that is, it's the chatter in your head. All those voices, all that chatter you can't shut off. Yeah,
and like in the Pixar movie Up with the dog, that every time something went by, he would just go squirrel. Like it's basically that. It's like it's the being overstimulated and being very easy to be distracted as well. So you said it kind of offhandedly. You're like, besides developing introverted intuition and being by myself, what else can I do? And the answer is like, well, I'm afraid to corral it back to that one space. And I don't mean to indicate that, here's a hammer, so all the world's a nail. But I think that there are a couple of very high leverage introverted intuition or perspectives activities you can be doing that will really make a difference here. So the reason why this is such an important component is in the list of things you mentioned, one of the things I remember you talking about was basically like knowing when to share, knowing when not to, having an idea of like when I should stick around, when I should be quiet. There's all these questions about how to show up at your best in social situations when you're engaged with other people. You're like, sometimes I stick around longer than I should. Introverted intuition or perspectives allows you to have more discretion in these kinds of situations. It allows you to see things in a longer timeline. So actions that I could take right this moment, even though they might feel good right now, well, being in the moment and not thinking in a longer timeline, that's, as an ENFJ, you getting into extroverted sensing or sensation as your 10-year-old or tertiary. That's being too in the moment. Now, there's a lot of benefits to being in the moment and being present. But unfortunately for ENFJs, it's not that you're present and in flow necessarily, although that can feel that way as well. When you are at your best, you are making sure that that's a peppering of the experience, but the fuller meal comes from being able to understand how other people are experiencing you, how the whole context is experiencing you. Whether or not the vibe of all of these humans interacting is in everybody's best interest. And that's sort of a fundamental part of your question. How do I know that when I'm vibing with other people, when I'm in a connective space and I'm sharing and I'm showing up in a way that kind of makes sense to me in the moment, but in retrospect or in review, I find myself maybe not showing up at my best? Well, your introverted intuition or perspectives will be the part of you that sees that longer timeline, that understands how everybody is being impacted in the ecosystem of that dynamic. When the co-pilot or the auxiliary function serves our 10-year-old or tertiary, in a situation like you're talking about, it means that you're in the moment, you're present, you're just doing your thing, and it's not until later that you're seeing the long-term implication and wondering how to change it. Well, that's your co-pilot serving your 10-year-old. Like your 10-year-old gets precedent, and then your co-pilot gets to play cleanup later. You want to reverse that dynamic. You want your 10-year-old or tertiary serving your co-pilot or auxiliary function, meaning that in the moment, you are thinking in those longer timelines. You are taking that bigger context or that meta perspective into consideration. And what's great is that the perspectiving process is about getting in other people's heads effectively, or kind of understanding other people's worldviews and where they're coming from in large part. But as an ENJ, you get to do that even more meta. Like you can do that for an entire context or a culture. Take that and writ it larger because you're taking in sort of more territory with your extroverted feeling or harmony. And so you want that 10-year-old serving the co-pilot, meaning that in the moment of the situation, you're still taking that longer timeline into consideration. You're still seeing that meta perspective, sort of the fly on the wall perspective. But then your 10-year-old serves it by also having a sense of presence and ease, having a sense of flow through all of that. And so now both of those functions get to be in that moment, and they get to be present and showing up for you and serving you, as opposed to one having to take a backseat until later review. So I'd still recommend that auxiliary or co-pilot function as the leverage point to your, to what you're desiring to accomplish. And I'm going to make a recommendation for that function that I think will also serve your ADHD diagnosis. So there's a thing called sensory deprivation tanks or float tanks, and they're great for anybody who uses introverted intuition or perspectives. And I mean, like, I recommend it to clients that have introverted intuition at all of the, at every point in their stack, right? Whether it's driver, co-pilot, 10-year-old, or a 3-year-old, or dominant all the way down to inferior. Now, I go to flow takes as somebody who uses extroverted intuition, and I absolutely love them.
Me too.
Yeah, they're fantastic. But for people who use introverted intuition or perspectives, they're a real key. They also simultaneously happen to be fantastic for people who have ADHD. They help the symptoms of ADHD because in a time period of overstimulation, they take all of that stimulation away. They can be hard at first. It can be difficult to use, like for a full hour if you have these symptoms of ADHD, but they're very good for you. So if you can stick with it and do it over a course of time, eventually you'll find that the benefits aren't just in the hour or the 90 minutes that you go to the float tank. The benefits carry with you outside of it. And they also simultaneously are fantastic, as I mentioned, for introverted intuition. So you could be effectively killing two birds with one stone using float tanks. They're available all over the country. I don't know what country you're living in. I assumed it was the United States, but they are available all over the world. And in the United States, in this country, they're at basically every major city. So I highly recommend checking them, and sometimes in smaller towns. I mean, we've got one that's like 30 minutes away from us and a population of probably less than, 25,000 people?
Yeah.
So I highly recommend checking out sensory deprivation tanks or float tanks. Schedule something that at least is 60 minutes, if not 90 minutes. And that first time, it might not feel great, but if you stick with it, I think it's going to have the impact that you want it to have. Like, it's a leverage point, and I think it will give you benefits that you can bring into these conversations.
You're basically talking about attention hygiene, Antonia.
Yeah.
Like clearing out your attention and making sure that you have mindfulness about the things you give attention to. And a 60-minute float tank forces you to shut all those inputs off in your life. So I think the value can be very high for you doing that. Thank you, Salvador, so much for the question. You can ask your own question about personality types or personal growth. Visit personalityhacker.com/questions. We also have programs designed to help you with your personal growth through the lens of personality types. Again, visit personalityhacker.com and find the program that's made just for you. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Thank you for listening to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. We'll talk with you on the next episode. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker.